There is a moment in the life of every seeker where the path disappears. What once felt like progress begins to feel like loss. What once felt like light begins to feel like shadow. And it is in this precise moment, when all external comforts dissolve, that a sacred door begins to open. You see, the spiritual life does not begin when we find clarity, it begins when clarity fails us. Have you ever found yourself in a room filled with silence, but the silence was not peaceful? It was heavy, almost unbearable. That is where many of us first met God, not in the light, but in the unbearable weight of darkness. We often imagine spiritual awakening as a sunrise, a soft, golden light spreading across the soul. But for some of us, the light came not as dawn, but as collapse. We were not guided by angels, but haunted by questions. Who am I? Why am I here? Why does it hurt so much to be alive? These are not questions of the casual believer. These are the questions asked in the deepest night of the soul, when the stars have turned their faces and the world offers no more answers. And yet, it is precisely therein, that void, that something ancient starts to stir. People who find God in darkness are not weaker, they are simply honest. They do not walk into temples with polished shoes and perfect prayers. They fall into them broken, unsure, sometimes even angry. But their hunger is real. Their longing is naked. They do not say, "I am spiritual." They say, "I am desperate." And in that desperation, they tear open veils that most people never even notice are there. Isn't it strange that those who feel farthest from God are often the ones who find Him most intimately? When we speak of darkness, we must be clear: it is not evil. It is not punishment. It is initiation. The true path often begins in disillusionment, when the identities we've built crumble, when our gods no longer speak, when we stare at the ceiling at 3 a.m. and feel utterly alone. This is not failure. This is the first step. It is the moment when the ego gives up its throne and something deeper whispers, "Now, are you ready to listen?" But the voice does not speak in words. It comes through experience, through loss, through silence, through emptiness that is not empty at all. Have you ever cried so deeply that your tears felt like prayer? Have you ever been so confused that your mind stopped, and in that stillness something beyond thought brushed your soul? That is where we begin, not in knowledge but in surrender, not in answers but in mystery. The spiritual life of those who find God in darkness is raw, untamed, and unorthodox. They do not follow rules, they follow fire. And the fire doesn't burn, it purifies. It strips away the false. It reveals the eternal. Let me tell you something that most spiritual teachers won't say. Doubt is holy. Confusion is sacred. Why? Because it means you are not satisfied with inherited truths. You are searching for your own. And true seekers are not content with borrowed light, they want the source. This often means walking alone, misunderstood, even feared. But God does not reveal Himself to the crowd. He reveals Himself in the cave, in the wilderness, in the heartbreak. Are you willing to go there? Are you willing to lose everything you thought you were just to glimpse what you truly are?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
There is a strange paradox in this path. The deeper into the dark we go, the more radiant the light becomes. Not because the light changes, but because our eyes adjust. We begin to see what we once ignored, the subtle, the hidden, the sacred in the ordinary. We begin to hear the silence between words. We begin to feel the presence that was always there but blocked by noise, ambition, and fear. And then a shift happens. We stop seeking God as an object, and we begin to realize God is not found, God is remembered. For those who find God in darkness, every scar becomes scripture. Every failure becomes a teaching. Every moment of despair becomes a doorway. They do not quote holy texts, they live them. Their lives become living sutras, written not in ink, but in experience. And what they offer the world is not doctrine, but presence. Have you ever felt someone just being with you without trying to fix you, save you, or change you? That is the greatest gift a dark knower can give. Their compassion is not cheap. It is forged in their own suffering. When you find God in darkness, you stop trying to be spiritual. You simply become real. You laugh more. You cry more. You stop pretending. You see through the masks. You realize that enlightenment isn't about floating above life, it's about diving so deeply into it that even the pain becomes holy. You stop needing to be right. You start needing to be true. And in that truth, you find peace, not the peace of perfection, but the peace of embracing imperfection. Ask yourself this: what if the worst thing that ever happened to you was also the beginning of your awakening? Can you see it that way? Can you look back at the darkness not as a punishment, but as a passage? What if God was not absent in your pain, but hiding within it, waiting, watching, whispering? And what if the only thing he needed from you was your willingness to feel fully, deeply, unapologetically? Many people spend their lives avoiding pain, but those who find God in darkness learn that pain is not the enemy. It is the teacher. It is the gatekeeper. Every tear becomes a baptism. Every heartbreak, a crucifixion. And in that death of who we thought we were, something holy is born. Not a better version of ourselves, but a truer one. A self that is not afraid to break. A self that knows the light because it has danced with the dark. There is a moment in every authentic spiritual journey where you stop asking to be saved and start asking to be shown. You stop begging for rescue and start preparing for rebirth. And it is often in the stillness after the storm, the quiet that follows the collapse, that the presence becomes undeniable. Not because it was absent before, but because now, finally, we are still enough to notice. That's the secret. God doesn't scream, he whispers, and you can only hear him when you've lost everything loud. We live in a world that worships light, but fears the dark. And yet all seeds begin underground. All stars are born in blackness. All true initiation begins in silence. So do not fear your night. Do not rush your grief. Do not numb your longing. These are not signs of weakness, they are signs of depth. And the deeper you go, the more you will find that God was never separate from your suffering. He was the suffering, transforming you from within. There is a kind of wisdom that cannot be taught, only earned. It comes when we stop running, when we sit with our sadness, when we breathe into our fear, when we stop trying to control the journey and start allowing it. Have you reached that point yet? Have you stopped asking, why is this happening to me? And started asking, what is this trying to show me? That shift changes everything. It turns victims into mystics. It turns tragedy into alchemy, and slowly, something sacred begins to rise. Not outside of you, but within you. A strength that is not loud. A peace that is not passive. A knowing that has no need to prove itself. Those who find God in darkness do not need to convince others of their path. They carry their temple inside them. They become walking altars. Not because they are perfect, but because they are present, fully here, fully alive, fully surrendered. You see, the ultimate paradox is this: the more we descend into darkness, the more light we carry. Not because we escape the dark, but because we befriend it. We no longer fear our shadows, we dance with them. We no longer resist our pain, we listen to it. And in that listening, we hear the voice of the divine, not above us, not beyond us, but within us. This is not theory. This is not philosophy. This is lived, raw, sacred truth. So I ask you now, with all the honesty in your heart, what part of your darkness have you not yet blessed? What wound are you still hiding from instead of honoring? What lesson lies hidden beneath the pain you keep avoiding? And are you ready, truly ready, to stop searching for God in the light and start recognizing Him in the places you thought He would never be? If you stayed with me this far, then something inside you already knows. You are not here by accident. Something in your soul resonates with this path, not because it is easy, but because it is true. The world may not understand people like us. It sees us as broken, lost, or too sensitive. But what the world calls weakness, we have come to recognize as sacred sensitivity. We are the ones who feel deeply, who see through illusions, who carry wounds not as shame, but as sacred symbols. And it is that very sensitivity that allows us to touch the divine in ways others miss. You see, those who found God in darkness are not always dressed in robes or meditating on mountaintops. Sometimes they're sitting at the edge of their bed, holding their head in their hands, whispering prayers through tears. Sometimes they're walking through city streets unnoticed, but carrying the wisdom of lifetimes in their eyes. These are the modern mystics, the hidden ones, the wounded healers. They do not preach, they embody. They do not seek followers, they seek truth. And in that truth, they become light bearers, not by avoiding darkness, but by walking straight into it. The world is obsessed with progress, with upward movement, with becoming more. But the spiritual journey of those who found God in darkness is not about climbing higher. It is about digging deeper. It is not about adding layers, but shedding them. It is not about becoming someone new, but remembering who we were before the world told us who to be. Every layer we peel away, every illusion we release, every false identity we surrender brings us closer to the essence. And that essence is not grand or flashy. It is quiet. It is still. It is eternal. There will be times when you feel like you're going backward. Times when everything you thought you had healed comes back. Times when you question if you've made any progress at all. But this is not regression. It is refinement. The deeper we go, the more subtle the work becomes. Healing is not a straight line. It is a spiral. We return to the same wounds, but each time with more awareness, more compassion, more presence. Can you allow yourself to trust the spiral? Can you trust that even your confusion is part of the awakening? And then something miraculous happens, your pain becomes your teacher. You begin to notice the intelligence in your suffering. Not the kind that makes everything feel better, but the kind that makes everything feel meaningful. You realize that God wasn't trying to punish you, He was trying to get your attention. And the only language you were willing to hear was pain. Not because you were stubborn, but because the deeper truth needed to be carved out of you. It could not be added, only revealed. And so the pain became the chisel. The silence became the scalpel. The darkness became the womb. We must understand, darkness is not the absence of God, it is the presence of God in a form we cannot yet recognize. It is the divine wearing the mask of emptiness, testing whether we will still reach for Him when there is no reward. This is the fire of spiritual maturity, the phase where we stop chasing comfort and start embracing truth, where we stop using God to escape suffering and start using suffering to meet God. It is a subtle but powerful shift, one that turns belief into knowing, one that turns seekers into sages. Have you noticed that the people with the deepest peace are often the ones who've lived through the greatest storms? That is not random. That peace was earned. It was not given. It was forged in the crucible of chaos. Because only those who have touched the edges of despair can truly appreciate the stillness that follows. Only those who have been emptied can be filled. And only those who have died to who they were can be reborn into who they are. The rebirth is not always dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as breathing in a moment of stillness and realizing you are okay. Even now, especially now, let's talk about presence. Real presence. Not the kind that comes from effort or performance, but the kind that arises when there is nothing left to hide. When you have faced every part of yourself, the shame, the rage, the grief, and held it with love. Presence is the power of someone who has suffered consciously, who has suffered with awareness. It is not loud. It does not need to prove anything. It simply is. And in that being, others are healed without a word being spoken. This is what the spiritual life of those who found God in darkness looks like. It is not glamorous. It is not always beautiful, but it is real. And in its realness, it carries the vibration of truth. Truth that wakes people up. Truth that shatters illusions. Truth that liberates. Not because it is comfortable, but because it is honest. And honesty is the beginning of healing. Can you be that honest with yourself? Can you sit with your truth, even when it hurts? Even when it humbles you? Even when it changes everything you thought you believed? At some point you stop trying to get there and realize that there does not exist. There is only here, only now. And in this now, in this breath, in this sacred moment, you are already touching eternity. The search ends, not in a grand revelation, but in a quiet surrender. You stop needing to become because you finally remember you already are. The divine is not something outside of you. It is the field you've always been within. And once you see that, even your darkness becomes holy. Have you ever looked into your own eyes in the mirror and seen the entire universe looking back? That is not poetry. That is truth. You are not a broken human trying to become whole. You are a whole soul learning how to be human. And every experience, every joy, every heartbreak, every failure is part of that curriculum. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is random. Everything is part of your awakening, if you are willing to see it that way. One day, you will thank your darkness, not because it was easy, but because it was sacred. You will see how it stripped away your false identities, how it brought you to your knees, how it humbled your mind and opened your heart. You will see how it taught you compassion not just for others, but for yourself. You will see how it led you, trembling and afraid, into the presence of the divine. And you will whisper, "Thank you," not because you enjoyed it, but because it transformed you. And that is the journey. Not from darkness to light, but from unconsciousness to awareness, from fear to love, from separation to unity. Those who find God in darkness become bridges. They hold the light not above others, but within them. They do not preach salvation, they embody it. Their lives become invitations, invitations to go deeper, to feel more, to love harder, to live fuller, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. So I ask you again with holy seriousness, are you willing to walk through your darkness, not as a victim, but as a pilgrim? Are you willing to meet your pain, not as an enemy, but as a guide? Are you willing to stop waiting for the light and start becoming it? Because the world does not need more perfect people. It needs more authentic people. More people who are not afraid to be seen in their rawness, their truth, their sacred mess. You are not here to escape life. You are here to embody it, to sanctify it, to awaken within it. And the more you do, the more you will realize that the darkness was never trying to destroy you, it was trying to baptize you, to make you real, to make you whole, to make you remember. You are the light. You are the temple. You are the truth you've been seeking. And the moment you stop running from the dark, you will find that it always contained the very God you were searching for. This is the spiritual life of those who found God in darkness. Not a life of certainty, but a life of depth. Not a life of answers, but a life of questions asked with reverence. Not a life of perfection, but a life of presence. And in that presence, everything becomes sacred. The tears, the doubts, the stillness, the laughter, all of it is God. So I leave you now with this one final question, one that only you can answer, one that echoes through eternity. What if the darkness you fear is actually the doorway to everything your soul has been longing for? And what if just beyond that doorway, God is waiting not to punish you, not to fix you, but to finally embrace you?